Okay, welcome everyone. Before we get into the discussion, I want to get us all polling. Now, for those of you who are watching us on Zoom, please use the polling option to answer the question on your screen shortly. Can we bring up the poll, please? Thank you. So the question you should be able to see on your screen, and if you're watching elsewhere on social media, this will also pop up there, is what percentage of GDP should be spent on education in India? Select one answer from the following options: 0 to 5%, 6 to 15%, 16 to 30%, 31 to 45%, 46 to 60%, 61 to 75%, and greater than 75%. What percentage of GDP should be spent on education in India? 30 seconds for your answers, please. Thank you. Become a given. We as a nation are a large and complex country, and there have been a great deal of very many issues to deal with. But the one thing that should never have given was education. Matters such as the education and the health of our citizens are so fundamental in nature that they should never be compromisable. They should never be an option. Which is when some time ago, a little sort of in the recent past, I spoke to many people in Delhi. I went through a bit of a shock. One person said, and I'll quote in Hindi and then provide a translation in English, इतना बदलाव आ गया है कि मैं अपने बच्चे को गवर्नमेंट स्कूल भेज के गर्व महसूस करता हूं. There is so much change. I am proud to send my child to a government school. Another said, बहुत बेहतर हुआ है. मेरी अगली 20 साल की फैमिली भी सरकारी स्कूलों में ही पढ़ेगी. Things have improved a lot. For the next 20 years, my family will only go to government schools. A shock, as I said, and a very positive one. With 600 million people under the age of 25, India is set to welcome a huge workforce into its growing economy in the next 2 decades. However, ranking only 115 out of 157 countries on the World Bank's Human Capital Index, many are concerned that India's underinvestment in education will turn what many have referred to as a demographic dividend into a demographic disaster or liability. So everyone all over India needs to undergo this shock that me and my friends in Delhi went through when we started looking at what's referred to as the Delhi model. I heard the Chief Minister of Delhi, Arvind Kejriwal, himself a product of the Great Indian Institute of Technology in India, say, high quality education is not charity. It is a human right for any child born anywhere in India. And therefore, providing high quality education to all is the primary duty of any elected government. I'm sure everyone will agree when I say that this is music to our ears. Many have said that an educational revolution is taking place in Delhi, the capital of India, at a pace and at a scale that is unheard of. We are here today to understand what these changes are, how they've been implemented in Delhi, what challenges were occurred, and what lessons we can leverage from Delhi's experience to bring about India-wide educational reform. That is key for us to understand here at the India series. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us from universities all over the UK, India, and beyond. Welcome to the India series, a flagship event series of the National Indian Students and Alumni Union in the UK and the very prestigious King's Business School at King's College London, where we take a very, very action-oriented view of India's growth and development. We look at how India can accelerate its growth across key sectors and what the enablers are to achieve this sustainability, this in a sustainable fashion and into the long term. But the most fundamental and critical enabler to growth, of course, is education. And therefore, I am absolutely honored to welcome today our keynote speaker for the discussion, Mr. Manish Sisodia, the Deputy Chief Minister and Education Minister of Delhi, who has spearheaded this transformation we will hear about in detail today. So welcome, Mr. Sisodia, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sanam. Thank you.
My name is Sanam Arora. I'm the founder and chair of the NISAO. I will be moderating today's conversation with Dr. Kamini Gupta, lecturer of strategy and entrepreneurship at King's College, who amongst her many other activities is doing incredible work around social entrepreneurship. Before we get started, a few quick housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded and broadcast live on multiple media and social media platforms. We welcome debate and dissent. Indeed, dissent is the bedrock of democracy. But while we welcome diversity of opinion, we will not tolerate any form of hate speech, abuse, or misinformation on our platform. And finally, a very big thank you to all our partners involved in today's events, the King's College London India Society, StudyIQ, as well as the Logical Indian. And so, not that he needs any introduction, let me briefly introduce for our audience Mr. Sisodia. As I said, he's the Deputy Chief Minister and the Education Minister of Delhi. He also holds the Finance and Planning, Labour, Land and Building, Vigilance Services, Tourism, Art, Culture, and Language portfolio. So a very busy man indeed. During his tenure as Education Minister, significant transformation has taken place in the infrastructure and quality of education that's provided by Delhi's government schools. He doubled the budgetary allocation to education, which is now constant at almost 25% of the entire state budget. 25%. Now think about that in the context of the poll you did earlier. Mr. Sisodia's work has also resulted in innovations such as the Mentor Teacher Program, Mission Bunyad, Happiness Curriculum, and the Entrepreneurship Mindset Curriculum. For his work in improving the government education system in Delhi, he has been awarded the finest education minister in the recent past, as well as Champions for Change. Mr. Sisodia, thanks again for joining us, and may I please invite you to make your opening remarks.
Thank you, Sanam, and thank you, Dr. Kamini Gupta. I'm grateful to everybody who is helping me to reach all the people in this seminar. Thank you for giving such a wonderful introduction also for the work that is being done in Delhi, especially on education. And I'm glad that the work that our journey in last 6-7 years, the work that we have been trying to do in last 6-7 years on education is being named as Delhi model of education all around. And it sounds good to hear that. If I decode this, what we have been doing in last 6 years, I would like to say that it is twofold journey. On one fold, it is, I call it fixing the problem of education, fixing the foundation of education. That is first fold, and the second fold is fixing the, or you can say using the education as foundation to change the society. So first of all, change the education system, fix the problems there, set the foundation. And the second is use education to fix the society. When I say society, it does not mean just a family or a personal or society in general terms. I mean, when I say society, it means actually state, nation, in fact, in global prospects also, when we talk about environment and hit rate and women respect, all these things come under society. And I want to elaborate on this further, but first let me share something about the first quote that I spoke about, and that is setting up the foundation of education, fixing the foundation of education. There are certain problems. When we came to power, being a new party, we came with some freshness and some zeal to work, some energy. And in 2015, we started working in education sector. I found that when I visited some of the schools, I found 125 students sitting in one classroom and one teacher trying to teach them in one small classroom in a Delhi government school. There was no signboard, no writing board. There were hardly desks in any school. Toilets were missing, were stinking around. So all this was happening there. There was, I can name it that it was a fleet of uninspired teachers and students all around in government schools. From where we started. So my first task was not to use education as foundation, but to fix the foundation of education first. So as you mentioned, that money was required for that. We doubled the education budget, which eventually is 25% for last 6 years. It's constantly almost 25% every year we allocate for education sector. Then we worked on teachers training, their capacity building. We sent them to best of the best teacher training institutes across the world, including Harvard, Cambridge, Singapore, wherever we have, Finland. We studied the world models. We helped them to understand what the world is doing in education. And as a result, we gave them good infrastructure, we gave them good trainings, then result started coming in. Earlier, it used to be 80% of our students used to get passing marks only. Now, we have reached a situation where 98% of our students are getting passing marks, but not only passing marks, they are getting high grades also. They are beating the private school students also in competition like Indian Institute of Technology and medical engineering examinations. They are competing with them. But again, this is the first fold. Providing good facility, good teacher training is the first fold of the work on education. The more challenging is the second fold that I'm going to talk about, and that's why I'm here to talk about. That is about quality education. When we talk about quality education, especially in Indian context, quality education is considered to be like you have good schools, good infrastructure there, and of course, good passing percentage, and for a student or a family, good grades. That is quality education. But my challenge was that to move out from this definition, this limited definition of quality education. In India, especially, talking about growth mindset was not on the radar of quality education. As I said, good quality buildings if you have good passing percentage, and eventually if you have good grades in term and examinations, you are a good quality school. But are you providing a growth mindset to the country, to the person, to the family, to the society, and to the industry itself? No. I can say this is about my second fold that I'm going to talk about. I can say that most of the industries around the world, not only in India, the best of the best industries who are hiring people, students from Indian colleges, institutions, always complain that the kind of intake we need is not being prepared in the colleges. There is a big gap. So for me, quality is not just about grades. It's about matching the need of the industry and economy first, and the matching the need of the society also, of the nation also. So on this we are working. We introduced a very innovative curriculum called Entrepreneurship Mindset Curriculum. And I mean it, I'm underlining the mindset, because usually when we talk about entrepreneurship mindset curriculum, people understand that we are talking about entrepreneurship skills. No, it's not about entrepreneurship skills, it's about a mindset. Anyone who is looking for getting a good job in NASA, or becoming willing to become a bureaucrat, or maybe a teacher, a manager in a company, also need to have that entrepreneurship mindset. So from grade 9, 11, 12th, we are working on entrepreneurship mindset. It's a daily class for entrepreneurship mindset, and we are working on that. On the same line, we are working on socio-economic issues and emotional science issues of the students. We are having one daily class for happiness curriculum. Again, happiness is not just about value, it's about your emotional science. How do you react? How do you manage yourself? How do you express yourself? It's your personality, how critical you are to yourself. So these two curriculums introduced by Delhi government are getting much appreciation. And when we say it's about Delhi model, grades might be getting more attention. Good quality education institutes, good looking infrastructure might be getting attention. But ultimately, these two curriculums are providing good base to the education system. And this is not the end here. We are working on some other curriculums also. We have announced, and we are working on a new assessment board, because assessment is another problem in Indian education system. We assess a student based on a 3-year examination at the term end, and that's it. We judge about it. We judge about the personality, about the knowledge of a student. This is unfair. World has moved forward. We are lagging behind, but we are setting up new assessment board where we are talking about technology-based, evidence, data-based assessment that is continuous also. So that's the big reform that we are coming up with. We have set up Skill University also in Delhi to you can say bridge the gap between skill and the demand that is required in the industry. But this was the thing that I wanted to say about the second fold. But this is going on. This is ongoing. First fold, it's almost, I can say it's not complete, but it's taking off well. Second fold, reforms that we talk about the mindset, about the gap that exists, the quality education. The work is going on, and we are learning, and that's why I'm here. I want to learn. I want people in the forum present here to help us to understand more and to use more knowledge from around the world and improve the education system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manish, for taking us through. You said, I want to decode this Delhi model, and thank you very much for doing that. It was very useful to hear these on-ground reports from you on, what happened when you actually started visiting the schools and what's the reality that you saw. You talked about, broadly speaking, 3 or 4 big pillars of this foundation that you're talking about. One was related to infrastructure, almost like, a literal foundation to build things on. You talked about teachers, and I know that there's been a lot of work in empowering teachers and principals as well. I know there's been work on parents and involving them in school management committees. But crucially, you also talked about this sort of reimagination of the learning journey of students, taking them beyond what we conventionally prioritize in terms of rote learning and things like that to the growth mindset, you called it, and the happiness curriculum and the entrepreneurship mindset curriculum. So it was very, very nice to hear about that. And of course, I want to talk a little bit more about both what has been done and the future roadmap, which you touched upon towards the end in terms of the assessment board and talking about skill gap between what our students have and what the industry needs. But let me first start with a question that a lot of our registrations, a lot of people who registered, they also wrote in this question. They said, we want to hear from Manish, and this is also a question for me. So you talked about this foundation, and clearly there is evidence that this model has been working for Delhi. We can clearly see learning gains in many ways, both from anecdotal accounts, such as Sanam said, and in terms of hard data that we have. So the Delhi model has been working. And on the back of that, there have been calls for replication in other states. So there are students from other states who are saying, why can't we replicate this in Bihar, and why can't we replicate this in other states? But of course, that is no easy matter. So Delhi is in some sense a particular context. It has about 1,000 schools. It is smaller in terms of area. Its citizens have perhaps higher access to infrastructure of some kinds at the very least. I read somewhere that before COVID, you used to start your day by visiting a government school. Now that is great. That's fantastic in so many levels. But that's possible in Delhi, but probably not possible in a lot of other states. So Rajasthan has 60,000 schools in some areas which are hard to reach. Madhya Pradesh has about 120,000 schools, much larger, a different kind of rural-urban makeup. The point I'm making is not to say that this was easy in Delhi. Certainly not. It was not easy, I'm sure, in Delhi, and Delhi has its own unique challenges as well. But it is to invite a reflection from you on where, for example, what kind of states do you think the Delhi model is more easily replicable than others? And what parts of this model are more easily replicable? For example, are the specific pillars more replicable, or is the approach that you took to coming up with these pillars more easily replicable? So a broader reflection on this call from people on replication would be lovely to hear on.
Thank you, Dr. Kamini. I also get a lot of visitors from different states, and they also are trying to understand what we are doing. Many education officers and even some of the ministers have visited our schools, and they have interacted with us, and constantly they are in touch with us and with my officers and education teachers also. As far as other states are concerned, I think first and foremost thing is it's a political will that has to be brought in on the table. Delhi model starts with political will. If there is no political will, it will be hard for an IAS officer or for education director or even a principal or educators to actually move ahead with that autonomy, with that resources. Because when there is political will, there is autonomy. When there is political will, there is money. We got 25% of our budget. Of course, we prioritized it. We must have sidelined some of the key, much pressing demands also at that time. But yes, we have been insisting because we have political will. Second thing I would request is, and I usually share my experience, that if you have a political will and if you can arrange good budget also for education, then first and foremost thing that one should do is have a good team to work with, because it's a little unfortunate situation in our country, but it's a hard reality that the top 3 decision makers of education system in any state are not from education sector, are not supposed to be, are not bound to be education. I'm the minister. I'm an elected person. The education secretary, who is supposed to take key decisions who approves a lot of things is also a bureaucrat who must be heading some good child department or maybe mine department tomorrow and maybe revenue department other day. All of a sudden he becomes education secretary one day. Same with the director. So these three key decision makers in the education system who decide the fate of education are not supposed to be, are not mandatorily to be from education sector. That is a big lacuna in our system, but it is. So let's fill that gap. And that I try to fill this gap by inviting a lot of educationists from across the country. Young generation educationists who are looking with some hopes to the education system. I invited them, and many of them are working with Delhi government as a team. Unless we have that dedicated team who understand, who is critical to our work and thoughts, we can't work. So that's the thing I suggest everybody. And last, but that is linked to first also, honest politics. If you try to siphon off money from education sector, then the teacher who is sitting in the classroom won't be looking. I mean, you can't force him to teach honestly. If you can't be an honest minister, you can't force a teacher to be honest to his or her work. So these are key things that I would suggest that one should have, or one can have, and then definitely change. I mean, there are changes that can be seen easily.
Can I probe you a little bit further on the political side, Mr. Sisodia, around so education is a long-term investment, right? It'll take like a generation, like a decade at least, for the results of education to start showing. Although you may have proven us wrong with results already showing across the government schools, but there is at least this long-found belief that education is a long-term investment. And in India, we have elections every 5 years. We run on a 24/7 election model as well, but we have elections every 5 years in states and at the center. So to my mind, it's always been very much a question of whether people actually want education change. And in some ways, Delhiites have shown by the sort of massive victory you got again last year, that actually people do want this change. People do invite this change. So my question is, do you think that mindset change or that revelation from a mindset perspective that citizens actually want education to be an electoral issue, is that unique to Delhi and maybe more of what we might term as urban areas? Or do you think actually that there is something there across the country that politicians need to realize, and actually if they can convert that it may actually bring them electoral gain?
In 2015, I used to say that I wish that there should be a time in our country when elections are conducted based on education as big agenda. The 2020 election in Delhi was actually based on agenda. That was education. It was the key agenda. So I was glad to see that. And of course, that needed 5 years to work rigorously on education sector and then showing some results also. We started working on education because we believe in it. We believe that if we want to improve our country, if we want to improve the society, we have to have good quality education. And when I say quality education, it doesn't mean that we are not the first one who is talking about education in our country. We have good institutions in our country much before we came here. But the thing is that the quality education is available to 5% of students. For those who are getting at least some education, 95% of the students who are getting education are not getting quality education. So we believe that we have to switch this 95% of education is also to the quality education packet. That is a belief. But in 2015, we started working in closer to 2016, I think 17, 18, I remember one of my good advisor who thinks good for us that we should win next election also, he advised me. They said, you have been doing a lot on education and I'm glad that things are coming on the right track. But I think you should invest some more time and energy and your political energy on some capital works also, because in election, people are thrilled with capital investments. People see this infrastructure, that infrastructure. I said, why do you think that school infrastructure is not that capital investment from our side? He was answerless. And I think 2020 election actually gave the answer.
Yeah, that is an interesting point, Manish, and Sanam brought this in. But to me, something that I find most remarkable about Delhi model is the fact that it has situated education into electoral discourse and discussion. So in 2020, we could actually see people discussing education as an electoral matter and then making decisions on that, which is frankly key, because unless politicians see that they will be rewarded for this work, they don't have the incentive to invest in this work. So it is, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, so you're absolutely right. So that has been a remarkable thing to show as an example to the other states as well, which is linked to one of your points about, leading by example, honest politics. So that is not just for the teachers to see as an example, but again, something for other states to see as an example as well, that you will be rewarded electorally for this. But moving on, so we've talked about this foundation. We've talked about some of the things about your approach which can be replicated, such as political will, working with a good team, and leading by example. I want to think or talk a little bit about what's next in the next 5 to 10 years. Again, this is something that a lot of our students, a lot of our audience members have asked. You talked about the assessment board, and that is, of course, a very specific measure. What I'm hoping you would tell us about is both some broad focus areas or goals that you have, that these are the specific goals we would like to achieve, and some specific implementation points that you have identified for that. And of course, now that we're talking about the road ahead, I have to bring up GNCTD bill, which just got passed. And you can, it's up to you if you want to talk about that or not. But I'm wondering, will that impact the agenda that you have come up with for the next 5 years in any way? And if yes, in what way?
Yeah, thank you for bringing this issue also, Dr. Kamini. I agree that there is a challenge, and as I said, and you also said in between, that Delhi has its own assets and liabilities. Other states have their own assets and liabilities. So we have our own unique challenges. This is one of those challenges we have been facing in the last 5 years, and still we survived and we delivered, because this is Delhi challenge. In Delhi, we don't have police. In Delhi, I have to think twice if I have to set up one university, that where will I get land from? If I have to open new schools, I have to think twice that where is the land where I can open schools. I have to think vertical buildings, and I have to think double shift schools that way. So we have our own challenges. This is one of the challenges we have been facing, and we again challenge this and we'll solve it. We won't let the work get slow, especially on education, I can say, and other sectors that Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal has been working. You asked that what is the next? That's why I said this. My first fold was about the facilities that may interest some people. Some people may think, especially who are not in India, that is there a system which is not having even writing boards in classrooms or good quality desks for sitting? But yes, that's the reality. So we have worked upon it. It's an ongoing work. But the second work, I named it quality education, or we set it foundation, using education as foundation of the society. That is a big challenge. In Indian context especially, but worldwide, I have seen that education has been used, or people have that understanding of how to use education for jobs, for economic growth, to alleviate poverty. We have been using this somewhere in the world successfully. But can we use education for peace? Can we use education to end violence and terrorism? Can we use education to protect the environment with some guarantee? I want to bring this discourse to education's accountability. And when I say education accountability, it does not mean that accountability of teachers or students only. Accountability of the whole education system, including this starts from me. As a leader, can we think of using education to solve those problems which we have been trying to solve through different mediums like protocols, global protocols, wars, weapons, or maybe some better understanding? Can we use our classrooms to solve those problems? Yes, we can. And we have to. We have to think that what kind of world we want to give to our children. That world has to be defined, and that dream has to be communicated to the teachers through a better executable policy and platform and content. On that we are working. That's why we have introduced this new curriculum called Deshbhakti curriculum. That's why we have introduced this happiness curriculum, entrepreneurship curriculum. This is not just about entrepreneurship or happiness or Deshbhakti. It's about the kind of India that we are looking for, the kind of world we are looking for. And this is our move towards that. But yes, it's better said than done. And it needs a lot of hard work. It needs a lot of brain work. And I look forward from people around the world who are trying to do some innovative work in this direction to come. Here's a government who has a political will, who has resources, and who has shown its commitment in last 5 years. We are not just talking. We have shown our commitment in last 5 years. So here we invite. If I would have invited at this forum in 2015, you could have asked me that, can you fix your problems first? You don't have better toilets in your schools. But today I have better infrastructure. I have better teachers who are inspired. Now I can ask the world that, please, let's work together to use education, to establish education, more powerful tool than any other tool to solve the global problems and the social problems.
And thank you for fixing that baseline, isn't it, as we call it? The building blocks need to be in place before we can then innovate. And so thank you for putting those building blocks in place, Mr. Sisodia. And I guess my question, I want to probe you a bit further on the Desh Bhakti curriculum. A lot of people have asked, and it's an interesting question, that patriotism, and we have this wider debate, not just in India, but all over the world, I'd say in many ways, around, the difference between nationalism and patriotism, hyper-nationalism and patriotism. And Desh Bhakti, of course, is very much, I think, on the patriotic side of the agenda, as you said, about building better people, building better citizens, and creating that sense of citizenry around. But is there a risk of subjectivity on Desh Bhakti, which is there a risk that, the next government that might come in, and, hopefully you guys will be in place for a very long time, but, from government to government, the definition of Desh Bhakti can considerably vary, because that is essentially ideological. So is there a risk that we could have this, subjectivity risk inherent in the process? And are there measures around that? Or do you think that, there's the framework is in place to account for that?
You see, the best part, which I am a fan of education system, is that when it adopts something, you can't remove it. You can see the growth of science education in the world. There was a time when people used to think there is something called tiniest particle of any matter, and that is called atom. They named it atom, but nobody knew that there are certain other particular elements also called electron, neutron, proton. But when these elements were introduced to the system, nobody can come back and tell, no, now we'll call them atom again and we want to call them proton, neutron, electron. It's the scientific approach. So when you introduce something to education with scientific approach, you can't remove from it. It institutionalizes itself. It adopts itself. And you can't remove that. That I'm quite confident about it. It's about mathematics, it's about everything, every subject that we have been teaching. That's why I called happiness as emotional science. That's why I call entrepreneurship curriculum as professional science, science of professionalism. And when you talk about Desh Bhakti, again, it's a debatable, because the word has some legacy behind it, being used by some political parties or maybe some sects or sectors of the society. But when I am introducing Desh Bhakti to the curriculum, to the school system, I did some dipstick experiment. I'll share with you. I went to some school and I asked the students sitting in the class that, what does Desh Bhakti mean for you? What does patriotism mean for you? And believe me, I'll share the list with you. The girls in 9th class actually replied, and we compiled a list from all the answers that came. In Hindi, they say, महिलाओं का सम्मान करना भी देशभक्ति है. Respecting women is also देशभक्ति. Protect your environment. चिड़ियों से प्यार करना भी देशभक्ति है. Loving the birds is also देशभक्ति. Following the system, red light पार नहीं करना भी देशभक्ति है. Don't jump red light and you are a patriot. Your patriotism is linked to your following the traffic rules also. So all these things are there. When I say that I love my country, I want to follow the systems. If there are certain problems, I want to work to fix them. For me, Deshbhakti is that. It can be the intolerance or maybe caste creed discussions, gender discussions, non-following corruption. If you are an educated person and after getting 20 years education, you become an officer and you want to take bribe, or if you want to you become a business person and you want to pay bribe to get your work done on priority, then you should not call yourself a patriot. That's the science of patriotism. That I'm going to introduce here. And that's why this whole team is working. That's why I said in my answer to first question is that this is the accountability of education. Should, as an educationist, we always take guarantee that, yes, we have introduced science to our students, and now after, say, 12 years of schooling, we can vouch for them, they'll understand the matter. They'll understand the sound, they'll understand the light, they'll understand the trigonometry when we teach trigonometry, or maybe they'll speak good English, they'll speak good Hindi when we teach them. But can we guarantee about the emotions that we teach? We teach. We always teach that you should work honestly, but can we guarantee? Should the education system as a whole not be held accountable that why you have wasted 12 years or say 20 years of a student by not working on the emotions of that student? There, it's needed. But again, I would say we are doing a lot of innovations on this, and I look forward more suggestions, more critical approach toward this, and more probe to this. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And I can see this sort of, there are threads running through a lot of things you're saying. So in the very first, in your opening remarks, you of course talk about this twofold approach, with the second one being, how do we use education, the foundation we've built, how do we use our education to contribute value to society? And then, therefore these things about the Desh Bhakti and how do you make good citizens and all of that comes up. The idea of education accountability, which is a powerful idea, I think, when you think of it as a system. What is it? It's not just about giving students education, but helping them use it well and meaningfully. So these are all very important ideas, and I see multiple innovations in your approach in that sense. So again, taking a scientific approach to education. And I want to probe a little bit now, Manish, to understanding the process. So for a general interest audience like we have today, they might be very interested to hear from you the process that you use to come up with these. You talked earlier about one element of it, which was about getting a good team together and getting educationists and speaking to them. Which other stakeholders do you, involve in this process? Do you use data very much? Do you speak to other countries? I'd just like to hear a little bit more about the policymaking process for you in coming up with some of these approaches and some of these innovations.
Of course, I try to understand from the world over, and I have me and my team, and I've sent my teachers and principals to explore the world. We have sent them to explore the private school, best of the best private schools in Delhi, in around India, what they are doing differently. They have went there, they have studied their curriculum, they have methodologies to teach. So that's all we are doing. But if you ask me, engaging with the stakeholders are well defined. As a government, we are the stakeholders because we are accountable to the system, society. Parents are stakeholders. The student himself or herself is the stakeholder. Society at large, as I said, global to local, is also a stakeholder. So we always keep interacting with them. That's why I always believe about myself, and I say this loudly also, that I am not an educationist. I don't understand E of education. What I understand is I represent public. I am a public representative here on this chair. So I represent what public is facing or thinking. So as a politician, I interact a lot with people. As an education minister, I interact a lot with people. But as you mentioned, that we have opened the doors of our schools to parents, especially. This is the first time. This is the thing, that important thing that happened in last 5 years also. That we opened those doors. Earlier, parents of, especially government school parents, used to think that nobody is going to listen to us. But now parents are invited to schools. They discuss with the teachers. They discuss with the principal about the growth, the mindset, what is happening, and especially when teachers talk about, because in routine parent-teacher meetings, if they were happening wherever, the usual discussions were about how my son is doing in history, or how my daughter is doing in physics or mathematics or whatever subjects they have. But now they talk about happiness also. Now they talk about the professional approach also, the critical thinking. And mothers actually tell them that, what are you teaching to our kids? They come to us and sometimes are too passionate about the relationship. They're so energetic to the relationships in the family. So we are getting feedback from there also parents also. And this, I feel, is one of the biggest challenge, because most of the time when we think quality education in regular you can say, normal pattern when we talk about quality education. Parents' understanding is also sometimes limited to getting better grades. But their children need critical thinking, collaboration, leadership skills also in life, and they'll be much needed 21st century skills when they grow up. Their challenge is not with the counterparts studying in different schools in India and other parts of the world, but their challenge is going to be with the robots who are snatching their jobs. We have to make them ready for that also. You can't just limit your understanding of education, quality education for your wards in terms of grades. So it's a big challenge. And we have been trying to get feedback. We have been trying to get them involved wherever we are. Like we decided this entrepreneurship curriculum. I'll give you one quick example here. When we were designing this entrepreneurship curriculum, some of the parents came and I got feedback from the business sector also that kids are not employable, they are not having entrepreneurship mindset, even if they have good skills. So we thought of having this entrepreneurship curriculum first. We named it entrepreneurship curriculum. But eventually, when we spoke about with the kids and the parents, one parent came to us and he told, "मैं अपने बच्चे को NASA में भेजना चाहता हूँ. I want to send my kid to NASA. I want him to become a good scientist who work with NASA. What will this entrepreneurship curriculum be useful for him? I don't want to make him a business person." So I said, yes, we are on the wrong. I mean, we are using wrong words. Then we use the correct word, entrepreneurship mindset. So this mindset actually was emphasized because of parental feedback on.
Speaking of mindsets and challenges, Mr. Sisodia, you did all this amazing, incredible work to put the building blocks in place over the last few years. And now we've got all these more changes coming up with the new assessment board, the new curriculums, etc. And then as we're in the middle of this, the biggest challenge the world has ever seen hits us, this pandemic, COVID. And like with many other things, my own observation is that COVID has accelerated many what we would call as pre-existing trends. It has accelerated those and brought them to the fore. And of course, it's brought about this sort of incredible challenge to everything we do across life. From an education perspective, what have been the key challenges that COVID presented in Delhi or in India at large? Because I'd imagine some of the challenges would be similar. And were there any good things that came out of it that you'd be taking forward as we go ahead? And there's a second part to this question, which is coming from the audience, which is, has COVID set back the decades of progress we've made, or the decades of progress condensed into a few years that we made in Delhi? That's the question. So first part is key challenges and things we may be able to leverage. And then second, has there been any setback?
I agree, Sanam. It has been a challenging year for the entire world, not only India. Yes, it has posed a challenge that the kind of deficit it has created. Will the education systems be able in future, maybe near future, to come up with this, cope up with that deficit? That's a question yet to be answered. Time will tell. Schools will evolve themselves, teachers will evolve themselves. The biggest challenge in the beginning of the COVID year we faced was that schools, everything was shut down. And then when things were opening up and people were thinking about coming back to business of the routine life, the education system was struggling that how can we send our kids to schools? We can't. We are afraid, we are scared, there's no vaccine, there's no... nobody understands the pattern of this virus, how it spreads. And we can't just keep waiting. So we decided to go online. When we said online, it was a big challenge because most of the teachers, including many of the private schools, were not that equipped with the technology. They knew how to use Facebook, they knew how to use WhatsApp and routine Twitter and social media technology. But can we use video calls? Can we use Zoom calls to have classes? This was a big challenge. And as a matter of fact, we had teachers who have not even used a smartphone in their life. They used to think, "Hamari to nikal gayi hai, we are just finishing our life. 10 years as a teacher. So we are about to retire. So why should we learn new technology?" Before pandemic. But I know that many of the teachers who were on that stage actually understood the technology. They bought equipments. They learned the technology from their next generation in their own house, or maybe the next generation teachers they learned, and they are using online classes. They are using this technology to conduct online classes successfully. So this is a takeaway, in fact, now. When we came out of this whole episode, we are not out totally yet, but still we have vaccine here and we have hopes to recover soon from and get back the school as usual as it was earlier. Here we want to take it forward. Our teachers want that we should not give up the technology. We should take it forward. How and what kind of technology we can take it forward, the time will tell again. But yes, we are working on to take it forward. As a result, we have designed one school also. We are coming up with one virtual school. I have read about many of the schools, many of the coaching institutions working virtually. We have read about many higher education institutions, especially working, or maybe some sideline projects or sideline curriculum institutions working virtually. But a regular school having kids from maybe grade 1 or grade 6 or grade 9, whatever the entry level is, but having kids enrolled regular, call it a regular school. This seems to be a new concept to me around the world, but yes, if there is, we would like to learn from it and we want to take it forward. Can we come out with a solution? Can we come out with a model of a school which is, you can say, anywhere teaching, anywhere testing, anytime testing, anywhere learning, and which is beyond boundaries?
What an interesting idea, Manish, and this ties up very well with what I want to talk about next. So you talked about, of course, the use of technology that COVID necessitated, and that's the thing with crises. Crises are, of course, challenging, but they also almost always create opportunities for new things. So that's been great, and you talked about the virtual model of school, and that ties in with what I want to talk about next, which is future of work. But I want to pause before that and do a poll to get everybody's opinion on what they consider to be one of the most valuable skill, or one of the skills that we will value a lot in the next decade or so. So Izzy, if we could please have that poll going for us now. So Zoom only allows us to choose one option, unfortunately, and there may be the temptation to want to choose more than one, but I'd appreciate if you could pick whichever one you think is the most important skill that is likely to be valued over the next decade. Just take 20 seconds or so to do this. Right. So, okay. So the results are up there, and we see that, of course, I expected people to choose many of them, but emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills is overwhelmingly the top one that's picked. And then the next one is creative thinking and initiative taking, which ties in with some of the points you were making earlier as well, Manish. But the larger point I want to make, if we see here, people management, financial management, these are skills that we have prioritized very much in the past. And the intuition of our audience is very correct, because research also tells us that financial management, people management, these are skills that are going to be less valued over the next 10, 15 years compared to things like emotional intelligence, interpersonal skills, in analytical problem solving skills, and creative.
Can I take a picture of this?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll take a picture of this so that we can talk about it. Thank you.
So the idea of running this, of course, was to say that education is not a static field, and the future of education is tied very closely with the future of work. And the skills we've prioritized in the past may not be the skills that we are going to prioritize in the future. And I wanted to bring you in to talk a little bit about that. So what are some key areas of priority for you, keeping in mind future of work and how that's changing? You talked earlier about discussing or being open to hearing from industry what they require and adapting based on that. But is industry, are other stakeholders, businesses also collaborators in developing some of these things for you, so that the people who come out of the education system are primed to join these workforce with the skills that are needed? So some thoughts around that would be great, Manish.
Yeah, thank you once again. And this is important. What kind of engagement we can have with the universities? The collaboration is required, because world over universities are being run by either by the industry itself, or in India also I have just interacted with many of the great industry guys who are the pioneer since last 4 or 5 decades in the sector, in different sectors, and I met them because we are setting up this skill university. And I was surprised to know that many, or rather maximum of them, are actually running their own coaching institutes, training institutes right now. They say that when you as an education institution, education system, send your after school student to some professional training, we are not happy with that. So we set up our own. So that's a big thing that is happening, big change that I could see here. So industry has to be uh, taken into account into collaboration. No professional university can work with this, but we have to understand that any industry partnership, how it will work and what it will lead for. Any industry who is coming to you with collaboration will only think for their own current needs, or needs maybe in next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But your question is also about a decade later. So when I was thinking, that's why I took the picture in particular, because when you were posing the question, I thought that this list is the exhaustive list. Not this is not the this is not covering the and all the aspects of careers, the jobs, but it covers a lot of dimensions. I was thinking when I was reading this survey, especially after the voting, and your question is where do we go after, what is our target, what is our goal after 10 years. Can I take you back 10 years back? What was the situation in 2010, or rather we can say 20 or 10 years, 10 to 20 years back? One of the least voted sector, that is financial management, could have been most voted in 2001. Do you agree with me? Yeah. So
Yeah.
this is how the things are changing. Why this is changing? And as I said just maybe 5 minutes back, our challenge is not with the students studying with us or with other school or other school in the country or the world. Our challenge is with the robots now, is with the computers now. Financial management, which used to be the sought after job just 10 or 20 years back, is just 3% today. It might not be the exhaustive, but it's a big representative survey. People who are sitting here are not ordinary people. They are well educated, well informed. They have the best of the best education from the best institutions, are giving this idea that only 1%, 3% people think that financial management is the future job, because computers have finished it. Because robots and computers and artificial intelligence is doing better than a human being. So now when we look forward for 10 years, we have to think that how can we coexist in a world where computers and robots are snatching the job that we are doing today. Many of the jobs that are being talked about here, say creative thinking and initiative taking, how much after 10 years human being would be doing out of it. Emotional and intelligence, rightly, is one of the things that, especially emotional intelligence, I'm not a big fan of her movie here, which I saw on the Netflix or maybe on some social media platform, on internet. But yes, these are the challenging that we are facing. And if we are thinking to redesign our education system, we have to think that the world is not moving alone. The world is moving ahead with the growth in artificial intelligence. The intelligence that would be required after 10 years might not be on the same subjects that we are studying today, or for which we are preparing our students today. They might not even exist today. We have to think on that. So answer can't be in one word or one line. It's a big black hole. We have to look for the answer. We can't just keep pushing all the things we know into the tunnel of the school and colleges, and we push our students, go and learn, go and do. No, it's not going to work in future. Like today, and very quick sample showed us financial management was one of the biggest sought after job 10 years back, not today. So I think we have to see a big picture out of it.
Speaking of emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills, one of the related aspects to this, and again, this is a very sort of commonly posted question, and I'm going to quote a question from a student at Queen. This person is asking, education is the starting point of everything. How and when do you think mental health well-being and will be addressed as a mandatory session in our curriculums across India, and just in this and without taking as long as it took sex education to be added to curriculums. Not to mention that this would have a wider impact on other issues like suicide rates and help strike a balance with the pressure of education. So I know that we've got the happiness curriculum, and that's probably the start to that. But across India wide, what is the scene with mental health well-being is the question.
So making them confident, making them critical about their own situation, about their own resources and the possibilities, are all these things that make them emotionally sound. That's why I use this word. Happiness curriculum is based on emotional science to make a student emotionally sound. It's important to understand. Uh, Once a student is emotionally sound, if he or she understands the science of emotion, how they react, how they behave, how others should be also behaving on the same science. The science drives me, is also driving you, also driving Dr. Kamini also. So this is how happiness is being done. Happiness curriculum is being delivered, and I personally think happiness curriculum is the answer. When we were celebrating this 1 year of happiness curriculum in our schools, that was pre-COVID year, and we had a big function here of 1 year. We invited the Honorable Chief Justice of India to inaugurate that function, and he had some conversation with the kids who were present there. He had some conversation with the teachers who have been attending, who have been taking the happiness class in last 1 year. After interacting with them, his suo motu reaction was that if these things go on and successfully, I think courts would be required in lesser numbers. This is coming from Chief Justice of India, then Chief Justice of India. So I think being emotional sound is very important. And happiness curriculum, I think, is the answer so far I have.
Thank you. I was thinking as well that what I've read about the meditation classes and introspection sort of feed well into the mental well-being aspects as well. So I'm glad sort of Sana moved us towards the audience's questions as well, because I was not mindful of time. I'm enjoying this conversation so much. But let's take a few questions now from the audience. So one of the audience questions is, and this is, I would say this is the cynicism, frankly, I mean, that a lot of us might share. So it comes from a place of good intent, but some skepticism. Is honest political will enough to repair a broken educational system? Do you think it also requires social behavioral change with people? So how do you, I think the question speaks a lot also to how do you infuse all the members of this educational system with that will? So is the will just at the leadership enough? And if not, then how do you sort of create that social behavioral change in the rest of the educational system down to the teachers and everybody else?
I completely agree. Political will is not just enough thing, but yes, it's an important pillar of the whole system and the whole reform that is being worked upon in Delhi or maybe wherever we are looking for. Political will is one of the foremost pillar, one of the most important pillar. Then, of course, as we have been working on, funds are required. If we have political will and if we don't have money or we are not courageous enough to set aside some of our pressing demands and think that no, we'll spend only on education first and then spend something else on something else. That decision making has to be there. Prioritizing to spend on education, invest on education is also there. Then, of course, the team. You can have money, you can have political will, but if you don't have a team who has a vision, who has some sort of understanding of education, of the ground realities, you can't work. So 3 pillars, I say, and then the world is there. You can learn from, and you can do, and you can learn from your own work and experiments.
Mr. Sisodia, one other question that is coming up consistently from many students, and I think there's students here from across British universities, there's students who've joined from America, and of course in India, and from belonging to a lot of states in India. They're asking whether there are any states where aspects of the Delhi model are already being looked at, or if you're having conversations about how this about extending this elsewhere to India. I guess the virtual model might also open up opportunities there, but it'd be great for you to expand on that.
Yeah, that's why we thought of virtual model, because students studying in different parts of the country can also get enrolled themselves into virtual model if they are looking to get education on Delhi model. So, but that will have its own limitations also. Yes, many other states have been trying to understand what we are doing. They have asked us our decisions. They have asked us the processes that we have adopted. They have sent their teachers and education officers for understanding in detail. How much they are doing, frankly, I don't know. I know a minister who actually requested us that when I visited your school, I saw the desks are very pretty cool. So where do you get them? And we said we got it from there. I introduced them to engineers. They said, can I show one of the desks to my engineers there? And he actually imported one of the desks from our school to their state. But that's very small thing. A lot of other states are trying to do good things. I'm not saying we are the only one who are trying to do good things, but uh, time tells and result tells everything. Not the CBSE examination result, but usually as an outcome, the ultimate outcome. Private schools, many private schools around the country are doing few good stuff, and we are learning. Yesterday also, I was in a school in Gangtok, Sikkim, and I was trying to learn from them what they are doing differently and how they are doing, and how can we adopt their practices, how can we treat them as a pilot and then adopt at larger scale. So things are moving on, and the ultimate answer is again in politics. If people want change, they have to choose honest politics who is committed to education.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, people. So I guess it's good to point that out, that part of the responsibility at least also lies with the people, and we have to take that responsibility and choose wisely. I'm going to pick up a question which also allows me to ask one question that I'm interested in, which is now related to some personal reflections on your journey. So the question is from an audience member: What is your advice? What is your advice to young people who want to come in politics to serve the nation? And I'm going to make that a little bit broader. So of course you've had an unconventional journey in some ways. Unconventional journeys I'm a big fan of personally anyway, but you were a journalist and then you transitioned into activism and then into active politics. So we'd love to hear a little bit about your reflections on that journey and any advice you have. And advice, this person is, audience member is asking about advice for people who want to join politics. But equally, I would think it would be nice to hear advice to people who want to start edtech solutions or educational related ventures or startups in this sector. Are there any areas that you think they should join particularly versus others? And the other is, of course, around your reflections and advice on policy making, a career in policy making and politics.
So my quick answer to this would be that join Aam Aadmi Party, be a part of Team Kejriwal member, be a member of Team Kejriwal. And it's, let me warn you that it's not easy to be a member of Team Kejriwal, because the person called Arvind Kejriwal is a tough man. He sets the bar so high that many of the time we find that this is too high for us to meet. But yes, a leader who is committed to education, to the welfare, and to clean politics is required. And Mr. Arvind Kejriwal is, we are fortunate enough that we are working with him. We have got him as a leader to work with. If anybody actually want to work on education and through politics especially, if you simply want to work on education, you can be a teacher. But if you want to work on political interventions like this that we are doing, you have to be part of some political regime. And I don't think any other political regime is serious enough about education as Mr. Arvind Kejriwal's Aam Aadmi Party is doing. So I invite everybody to be part of that.
Thank you for that, and a very interesting journey, isn't it? Coming from journalism and being into hardcore politics, and then now leading such a transformative change for the country. And I do think that's the definition of true patriotism. So thank you for that. And then I guess I'll take one final question before we move into the last part of the discussion. And this question is very much about something you mentioned earlier, from a looking ahead perspective. You said that there's been an announcement of a new board of education for Delhi. And we haven't had a Delhi sort of school board of education before. So I'd like if you could please share the sort of baseline thinking around that, Mr. Sisodia, and also what the roadmap is for that to be implemented over the course of the coming years.
As I said in the beginning, this new board is an idea to reform the kind of reforms we could have done so far, getting good buildings, getting good teaching, inspiring environment around the schools, and then getting good results in examination. It's okay, over. It will go on. But what next? The big ticket reform that I talk about mindset, I talk about the the 21st century skills, the challenges that we have in future education. All of them need to be sorted out here when where we stand today, and that we can sort out through a board. We agree or disagree, we may agree or disagree, but the hard truth is that we whatever we think good about education, it doesn't drive the education. What drives the education is the examination system. Whatever good words we write in our education policies, we'll work on 360 degree development, we will do away with the rote learning, we'll make education more understanding about the issues. Whatever good things we talk about education, we can write in education policy and textbooks and the curriculum frameworks. But the ultimate delivery is not happening on the basis of those announcements. The ultimate delivery is happening in the classroom based on the last 5-year questionnaires. That's a hard reality. The questions asked in last 5 years have more power than any policy, than any good intent. So that's why we need to change this whole education system. Currently, our education system is based on rote learning, A. B, it's based on a 3-hour rote learning test, that's largely a memory test at the end of the year, which the teachers and students both think that it's not doing justice to us. Teachers think that we do a lot of hard work with the students. Students think that we have done so much in the last 1 year. And now just based on one 3-hour test, you are judging us for the life. This is not fair with us. World has moved ahead. We have seen in European and American and many other countries that there are continuous evaluation processes where at large scale they are using technology, and technology exists all over the world now. We can use technology. So this board will be using technology at large and using the assessment tools not just to judge the student, but to help the teacher and the student also, that what you have been able to understand, what you have not been able to understand, what should be your approach in next course of action, in next chapters, or maybe next lectures. So all this intervention will come through this board. This is not just a term and examination board. This is not just a state replica of CBSE board. So that's why we are working on it. It's a big challenging thing. We are learning from other countries. We're learning from other boards also.
Mr. Sisodia, thank you for that. And I find it incredible that you have used the term learner for yourself. And my dad always says that the greatest teacher is the one who continues to learn and continues to inspire. And in the spirit of learning, we can't take any more questions. We have run out of time, but I do want to say that there is a lot of offer from students and researchers in British universities to contribute to the Delhi government's work on education. So we can share all those details with you, and I'm sure you'll take those on board. There is an offer, for instance, for teaching ethics in Delhi government schools, and also creatively teaching science. So I think we'll share all those details with you. But in the interest of time, I do want to move us on to the final part of this session, which is perhaps the most exciting bit for me and Kamini, speaking for Kamini as well, which is around action. And at the India series, we were very keen. So, we've had all this access to webinar-based conversations. Webinars are happening all the time. And actually, they're great because they've democratized access to thought leadership with leaders such as yourself. But at the India series, Kamini and I were very keen that when we thought about doing this, we thought we want to go one step ahead. And so we've chosen, as I mentioned in the beginning of this session, that we've chosen 6 or 7 sectors and areas that we think are necessary for India's growth, including, for instance, education. And we are going to invite Mr. Sisodia and the champion for each of those areas to essentially pose a research question. This research the opportunity for research is then going to be offered to students across the world, Indian origin or not, to participate in this research that's championed by the speaker to answer some very pertinent questions around the topic of interest. The topic of interest today, of course, is education. And I'll just quickly talk through why I think it's really important for us to for people to do that. I will put up details on my screen just in a second so people can see why it's important, but this is for the audience members. If I could be allowed to share my screen, guys, I'll put up that on screen. But essentially, it's great for your CVs, guys, to get involved. It is a very unique opportunity. You are able to then participate in India's nation building. Going beyond being Twitter and Facebook responders. Let's participate in India's just nation building journey. Let's get something on our CVs. Let's contribute to the fantastic work that's being done and shape the journey going forward. I think the Indian diaspora has so much knowledge that can be transferred as well, both in a bilateral way to India, that can bring some of the experiences we've had abroad into the evolvement journey, as well as also take away experiences from India outside to help improve. So if I put this up on my screen for everyone to see, there is a QR code here as well, guys, that you can just simply scan in order to apply for the opportunity. There are opportunities in writing and storytelling. There is, of course, the research opportunity. Then there are opportunities in project management of this. So applications are now open. Do scan your QR code to submit the application. And if you have any queries, get in touch with us. But without further stalling, Mr. Sisodia, please do announce the question you would like our students and young professionals to research.
I think all of these for us and can help us in researching by doing that research. So I personally feel there are so many people who are, you can say, esteemed scholars from King's College or British universities, and maybe having other different backgrounds also. We look forward to work with them. We want to invite them to work with us directly or indirectly, maybe virtually, or maybe while being in Delhi. But it's a big thing happening in Delhi. It needs a lot of caring attention also. When we are very small state here, we have our own challenges, and a lot of things that have not been done. We can't go alone. We have to take the country all together in understanding and doing that. So it's a multi-dimensional thing that is taking place. So all aspects that you mentioned are required. I can choose one or two.
So, Mr. Sisodia, is there a core question that you'd like us to research, around education that is of importance to you?
Yeah, like we discussed about mindset, the whole assessment system that we are reforming and the kind of content we are introducing to the new quality framework of education is about mindset, the growth mindset. Can we test and actually declare that mindset is a growth mindset or a static mindset? Is it dynamic or not? Unfortunately, the current examination systems are not answering that. I'm sure there are, I've been reading about them also. There are companies who are working on it. There are research. I heard about MIT professor who did I don't recall his name. He did research on his own son when he was 1 year old, and he did a lot of camera work. You must have heard of him.
Yes.
So all these things are actually important, and especially in Delhi's context, when there is a serious government who's trying to learn from the world, who's trying to learn from the innovative ideas and try to implement at large scale. The big thing that we bring together is, of course, apart from political will and the proven journey so far, is that we have a scale. We have 16 lakh students, we have 50,000 teachers working together as a team. So when you work with us, it's not just working with a school, it's working with the whole society. So can we, I'm quite confident that yes, we can teach the mindset, we can shape up the mindset, but can we test a mindset? Can we declare and then certify a mindset? Because we generally certify our knowledge that we provide to our students, that yes, we have provided and the students got it. So can we certify that? That's a big question that I'm struggling with.
Okay, that is a great one to know, and it links back to a lot of things you have talked about with respect to accountability, education accountability. Unless we can measure something, we don't know whether our efforts are actually producing the results that we want. So, broadly speaking, if I can rephrase or paraphrase, your question is related to providing quality education, and it is about how do we not only create but also measure this growth mindset that we want to imbibe and inculcate in our students. And I mean, I think it's a very, very timely question. So thank you very much for posing that. And that's it's true for multiple reasons. One, because India's population, young population that's going to enter the job market is likely to grow by about 10 million every year between 2021 and 2031. This is according to the government's central government's own estimate. And then further, a Deloitte research talks about the fact that we will need to add 10 million jobs every year for the next decade at least as well. Now, what this means and why the growth mindset becomes important is both because if we want our demographic dividend to continue to remain a dividend and not a liability, but even more importantly, Mrs. Sisodia, I really liked your focus on the learners. So if you want to make sure that we do not end up disappointing these millions of young people who are going to enter the job market every year, we need to give them everything they need to make use of that education. And that means both balancing a focus on job seeking with a focus on job creation. So how can they also start to create these jobs? And it also means skills that are going to be important in anything, mindsets that are going to be important in any job that they do. How can they do that better? Like the example you gave about a parent who says, my child wants to become an astronaut. But even if you want to become an astronaut, the growth mindset is instrumental in making you or helping you do that very, very well. So from a future of work perspective as well, the kind of skills that we're going to focus on or value are related to these. So that sets the context, I think, very well for us. And so thank you for posing this question. And we will now put together a team, as Sanam said, to take this question forward and actually come up with some actionable insights using, research, both primary and secondary. And all of you out there, I know there are many, and Sanam talked about this. I know there are many people, both in India and outside of India, who feel deeply and passionately about contributing to the Indian growth story. So if one of you is there, please write to us and we will find a way to involve you, and we can collectively this is a collective and shared effort, as it should be, to contribute. So we are very excited about doing that. And with that, I know we're out of time. So Mr. Sisodia, thanks again very much for sharing your reflections so candidly and so thoughtfully. So I really appreciate getting this insight into a policymaker's mind, which we don't usually get. And you are obviously, you've said this many times, you welcome difficult questions. So that's been good to have as well. We will, for the rest of you, we will continue with our India series. We focus on many topics that are important to the Indian growth story. As Sanam said, we've talked about healthcare before, climate change, today is education. If there is a topic that you want to hear about in particular, please write to us. We are very open to suggestions, and we will take that on board. And stay tuned for details for the next event. But thank you all very much for such a great event. Thank you, Manish. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sanam, and thank you, Dr. Kami.
Thank you. Thank you, and have a good day.
Thank you.